necessarily be elevated, but also to honor those who have been in the struggle for a while, on whose shoulders we stand. So this is why we created the Lifetime Service Award. So Reverend Walden, for more than 30 years while raising her family, has been a fearless voice against police brutality and harassment, and a tireless advocate for accountability and transparency from Seattle's police department. In 1990, she co-founded Mothers Against Police Harassment after two of her young sons themselves were arrested and beaten during a Seattle police stop outside of their Central District home. And so the group has been engaged for some time now and just trying to bring some sanity to policing and to engagement with community, et cetera. And so we're excited that she is with us. She's also the co-chair of the Community Police Commission, and it's a 21-member board established to provide community input into Seattle police reform. And so she was appointed by Mayor Mike McGinn to the commission when it was first formed in 2013. And so we've invited Reverend Walden to share with us. And we could use all the time talking about all of her awards and accolades. And so we won't do that. But she was awarded recently the Francis B. North Civic Leader Award for 2019 from the Washington State Bar Association Civil Rights Law section. So we're glad to have her with us. She's going to tell us a little bit about her work and some of the challenges she finds in doing her work. And then at the appropriate time, we'll engage in some questions and answers. So it's my privilege to introduce to you Reverend Harriett Walden.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invite. As you stated so elegantly, all the work that I did, that's how I started Mothers all those years ago. And sadly to say, we're still doing this work. Our work in the beginning was because the police was heavily harassing the central area. And the young people, when they stopped the police, when the police stopped the young people, they would make them get out the car and put guns to their heads. That's what was going on in the 1990s in Seattle. And of course, like I said, my kids got beat up and I started this organization with my friends. And I've gone through all the police chief, and I mentioned today on a call that the police chief, Simon used to say, you little women need to go home, and if you had some husbands, you wouldn't be out here doing this work. You all need some husbands. And so we've continued to do the work, and then in 1996, we changed the name to Mothers for Police Accountability, because we were working on a lot of cases that was more than harassment. I mean, police really were former girlfriends was being stalked and, afraid, and families, other kinds of issues was coming up. So one of the things we've done is stayed at the table. There's been some of the changes that you see in Seattle is because of us. I mean, the crisis intervention that people talk about so much today came about because in 1996, the police killed Beauregard Mitchell, a black man, 84-year-old black man that's in the housing right behind Walden there. And that was the second time an elderly person had been killed by the police. And so what we did, we organized elders. At that time, I wasn't one. Hello. So I went and found. So if you do something long enough, you grow into something, right? So I found a lot of elders, and I was the young one walking in the room with Norm Stamper, and we demanded that police be trained to be able to work with elderly people first, who sometimes are non-compliant. Sometimes they take too much medicine, or sometimes they don't take enough medicine, and they can be acting erratic. And people like that should not be harmed because of their situation. And then right after that, we had the man with the sword. He was mentally ill. He held up Seattle for a whole 8 hours. And then at that time, the police department was convinced that they needed to have some other training. And we went to Portland and we brought back the crisis intervention. And Mothers was responsible for that. Mothers was responsible for making the police stop taking kids of the police with Raiders hats on and calling them gang members. and put them in the police car. And every time they see somebody, because I observed police outside of my home, he asked a person to take off his hat, and he had it on correct and put it on backwards. And then he took a picture of that. And that's how they built the gang files. A lot of the people a lot of young people, they say were not in gangs. They were in gangs. They were not in gangs and stuff like that. But we also believe that accountability was for everybody. The accountability was not only for the police, but it's also for the community. And that's how we roll. We don't believe that you can have a holistic community without accountability for the community also. And that meant that people needed to stop selling dope and doing some of the stuff that they were doing because it harmed the community. And over time, after John T. Williams got shot, of course, there was a great coalition in this town called the MEDC Police Accountability Coalition, and we worked on that. And Mothers was one of the 35 groups that signed the letter to bring the DOJ to town. And actually, up until the untimely death of murder of Mr. Floyd, the police department was making some good strides. I mean, there were some good things that they had been working on. But they still have not fixed the accountability section. So the accountability legislation that made the Community Police Commission permanent had never been ratified. I mean, there's so many things that the guild still had to sign off on, and they were not on the table before. And that's why we asked the city council not to ratify that last contract, but they did. And so this president of the Seattle Police Guild is a Make America Great guy. He's the president now, Mark Solon. And so it's going to be probably some difficult time for the city to get a good contract. But again, there's some good things happening on the state level. I think that's what's wonderful. I mean, now this is a lot of, you will get some kind of accountability, and some of the bills is making it out. I mean, so far, there's going to be some good things coming out of Olympia. And it might be better to get some of the accountability issues at the state level, because that means that in the Okanagan, as well as Vancouver, you'll have some statewide.
We lost your microphone.
Can you hear me now? Is
Yes.
that better? Okay. And so what we're working on now is to let people know that there's no way that you can defund the police department in a city like Seattle and not have adequate service for every part of every sector.
Uh-oh, we lost you again. Yeah, we lost you again. Walden.
Okay. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. How's that? Is that better for me to hold it there? Okay. Why don't I do that? Okay. And so we're working on, we want to actually help educate the community that what they're asking for is also going to be against the consent decree. And I think it was a status conference today. And that status conference let the city council know that they knew that they cannot defund the police. I mean, they knew that. I mean, so it's and also you can't if you go on the 1,200 police, 1,200 police, you're going to be out of compliance with the consent decree. And the city council knew all of that. And they misled the people in a lot of ways. And the federal judge has to speak on a lot of this. So anyway, we're still at the table. I'm no longer the co-chair. I'm just a regular commissioner now. I was a co-chair from 2015 up until January. So anyway, I passed that on to someone else. And I'll just kind of stop right now because I've probably been going over my time.
No, we appreciate what you had to say. You mentioned a number of things that we'll come back to in our Q&A that I found rather curious. So thank you, Reverend Walden.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Pastor, for those who have just joined us, and can you affirm again the award Reverend Walden received?
Yes, we gave Reverend Walden the Lifetime Service Award for her number of years of service and being on the front lines and trying to help improve life in our city. And actually our region. You heard her talk about things that are going to be happening across the state as well. So thank you again, Reverend Walden.
And as I understand, has a son who ran for state office, Shakundi Salisbury, that ran as well, and is a longtime friend of Pastor Harvey and myself in the community. Actually, we've known him since junior high or high school, I think, for
High school,
Pastor
I think,
Harvey,
yeah.
high school for me. So very wonderful. Let's go to Dom Davis next. Dominique Davis was given the Community Award, Vision for the Mountaintop Award, and was recognized for his ongoing work in restorative justice and helping reform some of the criminal prosecution work with young people, and is a man that we highly respect. He's, come from the communities at which he's been working in, and comes from a background that gives him real relevance to the work that he's doing, and the work that they've been doing with young people in helping them avoid getting caught up in the system from up front, or if they've been in the system, how to get cases eliminated, and jobs, and just a number of housing and a number of areas with young people. So Dom, tell us a little bit more about the work of Community Passageways and what got you into this work. And I can tease you because you're a friend. We got about 5 to 10 minutes.
I'm gonna try to do it in 5. So I'm Dominique Davis. I'm the CEO and founder of Community Passageways. I came into the building at Urban Impact underneath the banner of the Choose 180 organization, and connected with Pastor Harvey and Steve years ago. And they literally watched the transformation from me leaving, me moving from Choose 180 into creating Community Passageways. They were eyewitnesses to the vision. So, and they always supported me through the whole process. So I want to thank you guys first, and just say thank you for being a support system for me. Thank you always for having my back and always being there whenever I needed to have a conversation or just anything, and always having a place for me to belong. So I just want to give you respect for that, and let you know I'm thankful for you guys. But yeah, the mission, Community Passageways. So back in 2015, I was leaving out of Urban Impact one day. Mind you, I grew up in the hood, grew up in the streets. Like Steve was saying, I hustled in the streets. I worked my way up the ladder in the game in the streets. I was a really good athlete in the community, so my name was out there already, and I had a good reputation in the streets. So I know the streets. I am the product of who I serve. The young people that I serve, I am them. I grew up the way they grew up. I ran the same streets and ran the same games and did the same things, right? And so I had already had a mission to try to heal our communities and let God use me in whatever way he wanted to use me to do that. When I gave my life to God is when the vision started coming to me of becoming a healer of the community and no longer being a detriment to the community. And so one day I was leaving out of Community Passageways in 2015. 2015 was a really bad year for our young people. It was a lot of murders that year. I went to a ton of funerals. I've been to a lot of funerals throughout my lifetime anyway, but for some reason that 2015 year, it was just back to back to back to back to back, sometimes 3 funerals in one weekend. And I was doing eulogies. People were asking me to do eulogies, and I was doing a lot of eulogies, and it was just crazy. So I was just praying. I was like, God, I got to do something for the community more than what I'm doing. There got to be something more. And so he gave me the vision of Community Passageways, felony diversion program. And we started doing felony diversion. I started pushing that idea, and nobody was really buying into the idea. It was once you commit a felony, you just commit a felony. You got to pay the price, right? And there's no coming back from that. And I pushed against that because I knew what God told me. And so God gave me the vision. I kept pushing for that vision to happen. Eventually, here we are in 2021. Well, let me backtrack. When I walked out of the building in 2015, there was a bunch of aid cars and police cars and fire trucks a couple of blocks up the street. I went down there to see what was going on. When I got down there was yellow tape everywhere, and there was a 15-year-old kid laying on the side of the street that had a drive-by happen. He had got murdered and he was laying on the side of the street. And I still see it, the clothes he had on and everything. Every time I talk about that vision, I literally see the vision of this 15-year-old laying on the street, and it's like 4:30 in the afternoon, and there's a bunch of people standing around the yellow tape and a bunch of kids that was leaving school and all that, and seeing school buses driving by, and it was just, I just seen the whole scene, and I just like this, I can't, this, we have to do more. There's something has to give. That was a turning point, and that was when the vision came to me that night. So here we are now in 2021. 2016 was when I started pushing the vision. 2017, we were a 501 nonprofit. Now we're 300 and I think 45 or 50 years of jail and prison time taken off the people that were facing felony crimes, felony charges. We are a felony diversion program that has maybe, I think, 9 or 10 other programs underneath the banner now. We do curriculums in school, culturally relevant curriculums. We help start BSUs, Black Student Unions, in some of the schools we're in. We do community healing circles in the community. We do school healing circles for kids of color that are facing issues in the community and in the schools and struggling. We do reentry programs. We have curriculums that we developed to put into the juvenile prisons and detention centers. We do critical incident response. When there's shootings that happen, the police text us and let us know there's a shooting that happens, and we go to the scenes of the shootings. The community also has a line. They text us and let us know, the little homies in the streets call us and let us know there was a shooting or their homeboys just got shot. We rush to the scene to try to do some de-escalation tactics, gather the information we need to gather. We're out doing outreach, knocking on doors, pulling these guys out the streets. We have a deep dive program that targeted the top 30 highest level gang involved youth and young adults in our community that the prosecuting attorney's office had gathered data on. And we got that list from them and said, we're not gonna sit back and let you just wait for somebody to get shot. Because these young people were deemed to shoot or be shot in an 18-month period due to the statistics and algorithms that they gathered. And the people, they're getting pulled over, they got guns on them, that been involved in crimes, they're involved in shootings, their partners and friends are involved. And so they started gathering this data. I'm like, no, we need that list. Let us go out and get them. My motto is, if drug dealers, pimps, and hustlers can go out and recruit people, why can't we? We're not gonna sit on our butts and wait for somebody to come through the door. So we're in the community, and what we started doing is I hire a bunch of OGs that are connected to the community, just like I'm connected to the community. Now we're hiring the young ones, the 18, 19, 20-year-olds. We're taking them through trainings, getting the tools they need, putting support systems around them, case managers, intake specialists, people to help them that got experience, and we're using them to go back and get their little homies. I just hired another one yesterday. We go back, we use them to go out, and they know where the little homies that need the help are, because they are them. They're in the streets. They know who they are. So at the end of the day, I'll wrap up here. At the end of the day, it's about community healing community. We're grabbing people that have lived life experiences out of the streets, giving them living wages and healthcare packages, getting them training and tools, right? Building them up, and then we go back into the community and reach out and grab and do the work to help people stay out the systems, get better education, get jobs, internships, apprenticeships, housing, all that stuff. So the 27 guys are behind me in this picture. That's my deep dive program. Out of the 27 kids that we recruited into the deep dive program at the beginning of 2020, and in 1 year, out of 27 kids, 16 of them have full-time jobs now. I think we're up to 10 of them have their own apartments now, have somewhere to live now, their own apartments, right? 2 of them are well, 3 of them graduated high school, and 2 of them are getting ready to go off to college. But I want to just tell you, only 2 of them got shot. I gotta say, 2 of them did get shot. 1 got shot in the face. He's alive, and we're supporting him through the healing process, and we're getting him where he needs to be at. He got PTSD. He doesn't, anyway, we're dealing with that. And another one got shot in the leg when 2 of his friends got murdered at the AM/PM down in the Central District when all those shootings happened down there over the summer. But at the end of the day, that's pretty dang good statistics, That's pretty dang good statistics for 27 youth that was supposed to be shot or shoot somebody and go back to the penitentiary or be dead. So this is the work we do, and we'll talk more about it later. But I know I probably went over 5 minutes, but thank you guys.
Not surprising.
Good stuff. Good stuff. We have questions for you that we'll get to later.
Thanks, Dom. Yep. Maybe we'll shift to Amy, because Amy and Brady have been working in some pretty creative business ventures. They started in the construction business, and Amy, you can describe it a little more. They got involved with a bunch of reentry folks that are coming back from having done time and trying to get back into the community. That rolled them into transitional housing and a number of projects. And it's just been a joy to get to know them. And I need to say, even before Amy and Caprice go, each of these folks has taken time out kind of spontaneously after the MLK breakfast when we said, hey, what about doing this call and giving you guys a chance to share with the Wrestling with Reconciliation community. Each of them jumped in and said, sure, I'll figure it out. I'll shift some things around. I'll handle childcare. We'll be there because of their commitment to the community. So thank you all for joining this conversation as well and sharing. Amy, share with us what you and Brady have been up to.
Oh, thanks, Steve. I'm like in tears over here, Dom. I'm sad that I have to follow you. That was so amazing. Thank you for the amazing work you're doing. And we're sort of on the other side of that. So I'm so grateful for what you're doing because we see the people that are coming out of the system, which I know you do too. But the people that come out of the system as adults and the impacts that they have faced for themselves and for their families and their kids. And so I'm so grateful for the work you do. And I have to just say too that my experience and my background could not be more opposite of yours. And I love that about what the work we're doing. I grew up here in Seattle in Edmonds in an incredibly privileged bubble. I was sheltered. I knew nothing about the criminal justice system. I knew very little about addiction and very little about homelessness. And really, and it wasn't until I was a lot older that I realized how unfortunate that was for not only myself and my children and my kids, but the people around me in my community. And so my husband and I went through our own struggle with addiction back in 2008 following the recession. And then came back to Seattle and started a construction company and called Square Peg Construction. And we very much by accident started hiring people coming out of the criminal justice system. So we met a group of men who had started their own construction company because no one would hire them due to really significant felony records. We didn't know that about them, but we hired them. They were incredible workers, incredible men. And we said, why don't you just come work for us if you want to? And they did. And we sat down with each of them and asked them, you know, what's your story? What happened? And just really tried to listen and understand. And the more that we heard about reentry and the criminal justice system and the trauma that they had been through, the more alarmed we were and the more we were aware of our ignorance and that we wanted to do something about it. So we took our company, our construction company, and we started with 5 men at the time. 2 months later, we hired 18 more. I called the Department of Corrections and said, I need more workers. Who do you have that's releasing? And they hung up on me. They thought it was a joke, a prank call. So I called back and said, no, I meant it. I really want to hire some more people. And over time, over the last 6 years, we've developed a really strong relationship with the Department of Corrections. We take people directly from incarceration. Some people release to our care so that they can get out and they don't stay beyond their release date. So Square Peg takes people into the construction trades. We teach them all different aspects of the construction trades if they're interested. We take men and women now both. Over the last 6 years, we've employed over 500 people in living wage jobs with full benefit packages, 401k plans, access to leases and housing, car loans, all kinds of stuff. So we've really been privileged to walk alongside some of our employees and understand more about their stories. We also, about 4 years ago, started a company based on input from our staff who had lived experience with homelessness. We started a company called Pallet. It is a manufacturing company that designs and manufactures homeless and disaster response shelters that go up in about 30 minutes. The design was actually built by our people with input and feedback from them, telling us what they wished that they had had when they were homeless in order to find transitional housing with dignity as they waited for permanent housing to be built. Last year, we deployed with our teams over 1,500 shelter beds across the country, and we have about 4,000 more in the works right now. So we're really excited about that. Same employment model. We employ people coming from the same background, but in manufacturing jobs. So just more job opportunities for us. And then finally, we have a company called Weld Seattle. It is a nonprofit, a 501c3 that we started about 4 years ago as well. Initially, Weld was started with the intent of providing housing, sometimes to our employees, but also to some of their friends and family members. We were able to work with the City Council to create a piece of legislation, the vacant property legislation, that allows us to use vacant properties that are underutilized at no cost to us to house people in clean and sober housing all across the city in neighborhoods that you might live in. So we have houses everywhere, 19 houses in 19 different neighborhoods. We house about 120 people at a time, and they stay with us for anywhere from 3 to 12 months, depending on what their needs are. And then we move them on from there and help them find permanent housing. Weld is entirely run by people with lived experience. So our executive director, all the way, all of our staff have personal experience with the criminal justice system, addiction recovery and/or homelessness. So we believe very strongly in the same model that Don believes in, peer-based programming, where we can provide jobs for people that are exiting the system to help the people that are coming behind them. So we're big believers in that. And between Weld, Square Peg, and Pallet, we have been able to provide assistance, either employment, housing, recovery resources, or a combination of those to over 1,000 people across Seattle in the last 6 years. So we're really grateful for that. And it's, like I said, it's been a real joy and a journey. God has absolutely paved the way for us to do this amazing work. And we just keep taking steps in faith, not really understanding why he's called us to this, maybe because of our own experience with brokenness, but it's just been an awesome experience. So the last thing I'll say is Weld is about to launch a new resource center called 1426 that we're hoping we can partner with Dom on too. So we're going to be bringing together a whole bunch of community organizations around social justice issues in this building. There will be a mental health and social work clinic, an event space, a number of organizations officing and providing services in partnership with the city, the county. And then there's also going to be a yoga studio, an art studio, and a recording studio for music and creative therapy as well. So we're really excited about 1426 and to join forces with all of the amazing programs in the city so that we can reach more people and also bring the greater community into the conversation about, how we can all engage in this issue, because it's going to take all of us. So with that, I'll shut up. Thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
hard. I don't think I want any of you guys to shut up. I would love to give each of you the full hour and a half just to share your hearts and your experience and appreciate the perspectives. And I was really excited when I first met Amy and Brady, whom, by the way, are such the sacrificial folks that they went to my personal mother-in-law's house in the CD just to walk through it and help us figure out what to do with this family home. So they're in my way big time and also very relationally connected and willing to be servants in all these ways. But I was excited to see them and her and Dom connect because of the work that they're doing that is so tandem. And I think we add Reverend Walden's to that work as well. Caprice, it is also such a joy to have you on the call with us. Caprice has been a longtime friend of our ministry and our connections. Her and the Drakes have worked together in Seattle schools, have worked together on a number of projects years ago. The first time we ever did this Wrestling with Reconciliation series, Caprice spoke on education at Seattle First Pres. It was a 3-week series, and Caprice came as a panel guest for the first series on education, and has just been a servant to Seattle schools and really wrestling with this issue of culture and connection and justice and race for a number of years. Hails herself from Seattle School of Theology and Psychology, and has also been heavily involved with Seattle schools and runs a business called Cultures Connecting. So Caprice, share a little more about what you're doing, and I'll give you a little head up. We'll have some conversation after this, just in what you guys shared, but we also asked each of you, we'd like you to wrestle with what can folks on this call, or what can we do as a community to move this bar around social justice and racial reconciliation forward from the number of different perspectives that we have as kind of the audience of this call as well. So to give you a little bit of a heads up. But yeah. Caprice, share us a little more about what you do. And
Steve, and I just love the energy and the passion that Reverend Walden and Dominique and Amy bring to their work, because this really is for us I think I can speak for them. This isn't really a job in my mind. It's about a way of being. And, I'll just start with a little bit about me. My mom is white, and my older brothers and sisters are white from my mom's first marriage. So they're all blonde hair and blue eyes. And then there's myself and my younger sister, who are both multiracial. I grew up in the Rainier Valley, went to Franklin, Mercer. Um, and there wasn't a lot of conversation about race in my family. My grandmother, who's Black, she would kind of hint at it. But it really wasn't until I went to graduate school that, because I minored in multicultural and community psychology. And I think, there was no doctorate program here in the Northwest at that time looking at equity and inclusion. And a lot of the language we use now as a tool to have the conversation wasn't there. And so I, through the first year in my program, they had us doing personal work, and I came to realize all the ways in which I had internalized racism. I wouldn't say all, but many ways in which I had colluded with racism. We also talked about sexism and ableism and other isms, but this one around race just really, gosh, it had me on an emotional roller coaster, from tears and anger to everybody needs to go through this. And so when I left graduate school, I started teaching graduate courses on the topic and did a little private practice, but really found that this is what made my heart sing. How do I get people of color to look at the ways in which racism has impacted them, so they can do some healing? I just got to hear the author of My Grandmother's Hands, Resma, I'm going to forget his last name, today, but helping them to heal so that they don't keep working so hard to make white people feel comfortable being around them, so that they aren't giving up themselves, that they're not trying to assimilate into white culture like our Irish, Italian, German, Scottish brothers and sisters did back in, the turn of the 20th century, that there's something beautiful about our cultures and our differences. And I think, you had asked this question around the challenges. The harder work is, and how do I get white people to face how they benefit from racism? How do I talk with them about this thing called white privilege? And have found that even just saying white people, just saying that will trigger white people. Like, why do you keep saying white people? Which, is, I hope that I can put my TEDx talk that just got released maybe in chat later, because I talk about that. But really, I believe that we can't get to dismantling institutional racism if we can't talk about it. And because white people are the ones essentially who have really created these systems of oppression, we can't dismantle them. It really is. It is white people's work. And so my challenge has been that white people see racism in a good bad narrative, like you're either a good person, and that means that you're not racist, and you don't burn a cross in your front yard, or you're not a Make American Great supporter, or you're good or bad. And it's really not about that. And so, but just getting them past it. If I ask, for example, Andrew, if I ask a white person, how do you identify racially? It's not uncommon that a white person will say, as a human being, or, as an American, and, which is all great. We all, in this country are those things, but it moves us away from addressing racism. And so, that's really my biggest challenge. And I'll tell you, I keep every card I've ever gotten, every email I've ever received that is, a compliment, because I've got all these invisible scars on my body, really on my, on my body and on my soul. And I've shed a lot of tears. For me, white people are the barrier to our change. And as long as they're not willing to look at themselves and the systems, then we will continue to need, Reverend Walden pushing for the police to, think about the way in which they are shooting first and asking questions later when it comes to Black and brown people, and Dominique having to do these, work with these young people where essentially our society looks at them individually as the problem rather than questioning the systems that really kind of create these kinds of circumstances for young people. And then of course, Amy on the, receiving end of it, trying to find, jobs for them, that this problem is embedded in the foundation of our nation. And we can talk about class in this country, we can talk about ableism, we can talk about homophobia, but when it comes to race, there's something that happens with my white brothers and sisters that causes them to move away from the conversation rather than lean into it. And so the work that Cultures Connecting does is we work with any organization that is open to it. And I realize I'm running out of time or have ran out of time, whether it's law enforcement or firefighters or architects or teachers or, community-based organizations, what have you. We've worked with the whole gamut to help them learn how to have conversations that they were not taught how to have, so that we can get to the business of dismantling racism. So that's essentially, and we try to do it in a way that doesn't, shame and blame white people into understanding, and we try to do it in a way that doesn't re-traumatize people of color. And both of those things are a hard thing to do because, gosh, we, as the author of my grandmother's hands, this trauma is in all of our bodies. So thank you for the invitation. And I would feel remiss if I didn't say that, Reverend Walden, I have always known about you and have heard about you. I've met you on occasion. I'm 55, and I recognize that I would not be here today if there were not people like you who really paved the way, for me. And so I want to do you honor and a service of knowing that it's cost you a lot to advocate in the way that you have, and just to know that I'm here and other people are out here and we see you and we respect you. And I'm trying to mentor people who are younger than me, will come after me. And so thank you.
Wow. Woo! I think we made a mistake, Burry, having all four of them at one time. This has been a powerful, powerful evening, and any one of them could have taken up the entire 90 minutes that we have. So thank you again, Dr. Hollins, for sharing. Since you just ended, well, I'll start with you with a question, but I want Amy and Dom and Reverend Walden to get ready as well. Now, you alluded to a number of things. You said a head full and a mouthful and a heart full. You mentioned something about fragility and privilege, the good and bad narrative. So in your work, what would you say is the single most thing we really need to get at in order to have courageous conversations that move the dial forward?
I would say for white people, it's moving away from them as individuals and looking at themselves as a collective identity, as a collective group. So one of the privileges that white people have had their entire lives and is that they have gotten to be individuals. They haven't, part of the assimilation when they were Irish, Italian, Scottish, Polish, German, what have you, they were these groups that were experiencing marginalization and discrimination, getting the worst jobs, et cetera. So they became white so that they could benefit. They then got to be seen as individuals. So they're, you know, lots of their conversations are often like, I worked hard, I made it. So they look at themselves as individuals. They're essentially innocent of you know, any stereotype until they prove themselves as guilty.
Uh-huh.
So these race conversations call them in to looking at themselves as a member of a group. And what does it mean to be a member of a group? Because people like Amy and Reverend Walden, Dominique recognize that people of color, we are guilty until we prove ourselves as innocent. See, we don't have a choice but to be a member of a group. And so if it's always about talking with a white person as an individual, then we have to, as people of color, have to keep making disclaimers. You know, I don't mean all police, I don't mean you, and I'm not saying this. So we can't really get to the heart of the conversation if we can't talk about the experiences of Black people, the experiences of Indigenous people, the experiences of Asian people, and how white people benefit, how white people created, how white people continue, etc. Because it becomes about, well, not me, my best friend is. You know, I work with someone who is, and so there's always this kind of naming of someone of color in their life as proof that they're not like all those other white people. And so nobody is like all those other white people except, you know, the supremacist white people, and those aren't the ones we're talking about. We're talking about the good, kind, loving, moral, ethical Christian white person. So I think that's like, if we can't get there to the collective, then we can't work together collectively to dismantle it.
Thank you for that, because that helps to frame the idea or the statement that we make. It happened again. Whenever a Black person is shot, what I've experienced is that people want to see it as an individual act. In our mind, because we're collective a bit more, we tend to say, oh, it happened to us again, because of that difference between individualism and collectivism. Thank you so very much.
I want to stay, so we probably will work backwards, and Caprice, since you shared, I want to keep the conversation going a little bit. And I think, Pastor, you really hit it on the head. So my wife, who's African-American, will often come home. She's a flight attendant with Alaska Airlines, and she'll exclaim something along the lines of, and very clearly, oh, I hate white people. And I'll kind of look at her and go, okay, do I leave now? Or you know, what do you mean? And that tension of understanding my role as a part of the collective, and yet also being able to differentiate how I can support the system without feeling like I'm, you know, just burdened by the system. But I have to do the work. I have to personally, as a white male especially, wrestle with that identity issue, that I'm a part of this piece, this collective. And I've heard Pastor Harvey, I see it in my wife. I think Dom, Reverend Walden, I'm sure can explain. You stated it as spending the time to make white people feel comfortable around them. And my wife will often talk about how much work it is to be a person of color existing in a white world that I just don't understand. Like, I don't, because of how I grew up, because of who I am, because of being white, I just don't feel it, sense it, taste it. You know, being around her all the time as she unpacks it, I'm starting to learn. But would you speak a little more about just the weight of life that as a person of color you carry, and you've chosen to work in this arena, so you carry it even deeper?
Yeah, you know, so first off, you know, I am a part of a marginalized group and an oppressed group, right? So I have privilege as a light-skinned woman, right? And so with that comes benefits. And so for me, I identify racially as Black simply because the world or society treats me as Black, but culturally, I identify as white and Black, meaning there are some parts about myself that align more with white culture. And there are some things about me that align more with Black culture. And So for people of color, we have certain ways of communicating. We have certain values, certain beliefs, certain ways of engaging. So I often use interrupting. I'm currently right now with my pastor, not that you're not my pastor too, Drake, but my pastor Braxton at New Beginnings. We are on Wednesdays having a book discussion on white fragility, right? And pastor invited the book by Robin DiAngelo, and so pastor invited a white reverend to come in and join us. And I told him, I said, you know, hey, while we were planning, I just want you to know, when pastor and I inhale, that's when you need to jump in, right? Like, you know, because I know that the communication styles are different between white people and people of color. And so, for example, Black people, like we love to talk, right? Like, and we love to tell story, and we love to feel that story in our body. And I loved hearing Dominique talk with all that energy and passion. And if it was just him and I would be interrupting him. And then he would be interrupting me, and he'd be like, no, wait a minute, you didn't hear me. And let's go back to that. But when we come into white spaces, just this as an example, our interrupting is seen as rude. So when I am engaging pastor, my pastor around this study, like him and I are just engaging, and we just kept forgetting that the white pastor was there. We had to keep stopping and be like, okay, yeah, let's, because he's not getting it. Like, it's like double Dutch, you know, just jump in. And so at the end of the day, I think for people of color, whether you're Asian, Indigenous, Latinx, you know, and you hear this America, speak English, whatever, we are like, we go home, and at the end of the day, it's like, whew, it was tough being Black today, because we are having to leave so much of what makes us who we are behind, because we are having to adopt or adapt to white norms, standards, values, and beliefs. And the thing, I love this saying, I didn't come up with it, but it's this idea that a fish doesn't know it's wet. So if you ask white people, what is their culture? They'd be like, I don't know, we don't have a culture. But you ask people of color what white people's culture is, they can absolutely tell you, because they're the ones that have to navigate those barriers to get that job, get that promotion, get into that college, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thanks.
Pastor, where do you want to shift next?
Yeah,
You're right, we're in trouble.
Let me go to Reverend Walden, because she mentioned a number of things that struck me, and then I'll come back to Dom, because I want Dom to, for people that may not be knowledgeable about a healing circle, to kind of give us a brief description of what that is. But Reverend Walden, you mentioned crisis intervention, being able to bring that to the city, and now it's spreading. You're talking about both police and community needing to police itself and be accountable. But then you said something about the whole defund the police issue. Would you speak more to that? What I took from that is that you're not fully on board with defunding police as it is generally communicated. Explain that.
Oh, I want to make sure you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, number one, it took us 30 years to get Black officers. Okay. I mean, it took a lifetime to do that, to get Black officers on the force. And also, you cannot defund the police department and the charter says that each sector has to have adequate police protection. That's what the city charter says. So the city is out of alignment with its own charter. Because if you defund the police, you don't have enough adequate police to be able to actually answer just regular calls. I mean, and you leave other people vulnerable. If you have an 80-year-old lady that happens not to be Black, that's living out in Lake City, somebody's breaking in her house, she needs to be able to call the police. I mean, and somebody needs to go there and to be able to provide services for her. And so I think that the city made an error because they didn't understand, or they didn't let the community understand that up under the consent decree, that could not happen the way that they wanted it to happen. And number two, you cannot leave the whole city without police protection. I mean, when the Seahawks won the Super Bowl, you had 400,000 people. You had all these people in the streets. It was a peaceful event. but they had to call in enough people from around the other areas to be able to come and help with that. So I think that because with what's going on, and nobody wanted to defund the police on on May 24th, nobody wanted to defund the police. I mean, nobody even thought about that. So I think that the city council has made an error in some ways, and I think that once the federal judge speaks, that the city and the community is going to have really understand something that the city council president should have explained to them. But one other quick thing I want to mention about race is that I collect dictionaries, and the 1916 dictionaries say that he who's afraid of a Negro is called Negrophobia, and so that's codified. A 1905 dictionary said to be black is to be horrible and terrible like a Negro, and it says for white, white is the color of pure, it's pale, it's pure, unblemished, purified, and the color of snow, without sin, like a white man.
Oh.
That's what's in the dictionary. So when people want to dismantle racism, you have to go back and you got to look and see what's codified. And what's been in the language a long time. So white supremacy is there, and it's absolutely in the dictionary. So thank you.
So follow up, Reverend Walden. So while there are some systematic issues with defunding the police, are there some areas where you think we can rethink what we do, how we do, if we do? Because part of it, some folks say it's about reallocation. Is there any room for some reallocation?
Well, I mean, I think it could be. I mean, but I don't think it was thought out enough. I mean, you know, the first thing they wanted to do was get rid of the police chief. I mean, because there is a whole, Carmen got caught in the perfect storm. The police guild, they mutinied out there. I mean, what they did is that they decided that they were not going to follow orders, so they mutinied. And then you had all the protesters going in, and then you had the city council who didn't have the courage to actually bring the police chief in to let her talk about the reimagining and the things that was possible. Right now, what has happened with all of the units being disbanded, the people are not being served that way either. So I'm not opposed to reallocation of funds, but I think it needed to be done differently. And even Minneapolis put a stop on it because crime escalated in Minneapolis when they started talking about defunding the police. Criminals thought that they could just go out and get away with crime, and crime escalated in Seattle. And the other people who talk about defunding, they never talk about Black Lives Matter and all the mothers who are crying because somebody killed their children. And so it's not a balance. If we're going to do something holistically, we got to talk courageously about how the harm that the police have, but also we have to talk about the harm that's happening in our community by people who look like us. And I think that's what Dominique is talking about.
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Thank you.
For sake of time, Pastor, I'm going to let you keep going to Dom. Thank you, Reverend Walden. Just appreciate your heart and your passion.
Okay, Dom, just give us brief descriptions of a couple of things you said. You talked about a deep dive program, and then you talked about healing circles. And then I need you to speak to what occurred on June 7th, 2020, and why did it occur?
The deep dive program was us being very intentional about not waiting for people to send us referrals on young people that are facing issues in the community. We get people send us referrals of kids to work with from defense attorneys, prosecutors, judges, probation officers, and community members. People, you get grandmas, aunties. Can you work with my nephew, my son? And so instead of sitting back and waiting for referrals to come to us, we decided to be more proactive, still getting referrals, but let's also go out and not wait for kids that actually need somebody to refer them to us and need us. Let's go be proactive and go get them, right? And that's what Deep Dive is all about, taking the OGs to go out after the YGs, the OGs against the, go get the young Gs, right? And then pull them in, and we built a village for them. And so in building that village, we started, one of the first things we did was meant to have a circle, and a healing circle. And so it took us 2.5 months because these guys, there was 8 different gangs represented in Deep Dive. A lot of these guys had shot at each other before. They were mortal enemies. They had their crews against their crews, all that. Took us 2.5 months just to get them to trust us as the people that are trying to get them to come into the program, to get them to come into the same room to have a healing circle. And when we did that, they came with bulletproof vests. They had guns on them. We knew they were going to come like that. They had guns on. They didn't trust the environment because this is how the environment that they've been growing up in, that white racist institutions have put us in this position, right? To navigate that way and be in survival mode, and then look at each other as mortal enemies because we've been brainwashed and indoctrinated to believe that Black is negative, like Pastor Walden was saying. You know, she just read the definitions. This is ingrained in us, and it's indoctrinated. So we got them into the room. We sat down, started having a healing circle. We started talking. It took us about 2 days of meeting. After 2 days, by the third day, that same group that was coming in with vests and guns, no more guns, no more bulletproof vests, and they were actually laughing with each other. They were actually laughing with each other. Yes, we do have girls in our program. Somebody just asked that question.
Right.
But they started laughing with each other. And then 2 weeks in, they became friends. They stopped shooting. They said, we're not going to shoot at you guys. We're not going to be enemies. I'm going to go back and tell my homies to quit beefing with you and your homies. Like, it was just a powerful moment. Now, I say all that to say the healing circle process is a process that you make people understand we are all facing obstacles and hurdles in our life. We all have some of the same trauma and the same issues. When some of them found out that your dad's in prison and your dad's dead, your mom's on drugs, or you don't have a mom, she moved out, like all these different issues. You dropped out of school, I dropped out of school. Like, why are we shooting at each other? I mean, we took these guys on a 3-day retreat to Leavenworth. We got 3 vans, went to Leavenworth, got 2 big B&Bs, and it was incredible, man. One of the most incredible moments. If I had more time, I could tell you about it, but it was a bonding moment that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. Now, in the summertime, that what Pastor's talking about on the 7th of June, we did a march in South Seattle. I've heard the numbers from 15,000 down to 12,000 people showed up. I thought when we started putting this march together and we pulled the team together to start planning this march, when we did it, I thought maybe 3,000 or 4,000 people at the most. At first, I was thinking 1,000. My mind was blown. All these people showed up from every background, every ethnicity, every economic structure, all that stuff. It was one of the most powerful moments I've ever been part of and ever witnessed, and nothing like that has ever happened in South Seattle. When we did that, the reason why we did it, like Pastor asked the question, we didn't just do that because of Floyd. We didn't just do that because of George Floyd. We didn't just do that. We did it because this has been going on for hundreds of years. This has been going on forever. This is something. And when we pulled the march together, our main goal was, we want to live, was the slogan. And our main goal was to deal with us shooting each other, because we had so many shootings back to back to back. We wanted to get a truce in South King County. We wanted to get truces. And so we started putting it together to focus on the gang thing. And then George Floyd happened. And then we were like, you know what? We're all mad now. We're not mad at each other. We were pissed off, right? And it was like, we cannot not address this. Yeah. We have to go in. And so that thing was a beautiful moment. And I empowered a lot of young kings to be part of the planning process and to be speakers there. And we had so many different gangs there. And what we said to the police SPD is, we don't want no police presence. We don't need you guys there to protect us. We don't need you guys there to guard us, to scare. We don't need you guys there doing nothing. Literally, I seen 3 police officers that whole day down in our hood. Chief Diaz said, don't worry about it. We'll stay out the way. I said, way out the way. We don't want to see you nowhere. We don't need you blocking our streets or nothing. We got this. We put our own security detail together. We put our own safety teams together. We blocked off the streets together. We did that. We went through a practice run for a couple days ahead of time. We locked our whole neighborhood down. Not one incident. There was a ton of different rival gangs there. After that parade, I had rival gang members calling saying, hey man, I've seen these guys and we didn't even shoot at each other. I seen these guys, we didn't even shoot. We're open to have a gang truce talk. We're open to have a gang truce summit like you want us to. We're open to talk. We spent the whole day around each other and nobody shot each other or shot at each other. And we hate them guys and they hate us. All those calls came in and I started planning a South King County truce summit. And we were putting it together. We were working on it. And then COVID said, nope, that ain't happening. So Yeah, that's what happened, Pastor.
Thank you, man. Hey, by the way, can you come take some of the street signs down? Because they're still blocking the streets, brother. The side streets.
I
That
think
that was a powerful, powerful day. I mean, absolutely powerful. And so we were grateful to you and the others that partnered with you to pull that thing together. It was outstanding. And may God continue to breathe on all that you're doing. Where's Amy? Where's Amy on my screen?
Well,
Amy?
before you jump to Amy, let me just say one of the most powerful images of that day for me was seeing the young kids out front
Yeah.
with backup behind them, holding a sign saying "We want to live," and they were proud, they were excited, they felt like they had some agency, and they were putting it down, and it was a fabulous image of that day.
They
So
were
thank you.
proud to be Black. They were proud to be Black that day. That day, they didn't have to hide their Blackness or shade it. They were proud to be Black. I had a group of Girl Scouts that were there, Black Girl Scouts that were there. They went out and sold cookies and raised money and came and donated it to community passageways. They were so happy after that parade. I had a group of young men and baseball players, young Black kids. They went out and raised money and came and donated. I was like, I can't take these kids' money. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to take their money. So we ended up giving it back in increments. But, you know, at the end of the day, it was just a wonderful moment that these young Black kids, thank you for bringing that up, Steve. They were so happy to be Black. Can you imagine if we had given our kids this kind of experience on a daily basis or even a weekly or monthly basis, and we got that experience growing up, how proud we would be to be Black? We wouldn't be out here shooting each other, and we wouldn't be victims of the criminal justice system, and we wouldn't be victims of white racist institutionalism.
Dom, don't ever forget the scripture. It's better to give than to receive. And so you give those kids a blessing by letting them give and letting them participate and take ownership of the work that they want to see continued and the belief they have in themselves. And it's a beautiful thing.
Amen, Steve.
Amen.
Amy, as we and I know that it's hard to be a white person on a call like this and feel like I don't need to have anything to say. I just need to listen and participate. But I wanted you to hear more from you about what was some of the motivation, or what are some of the lessons that you have learned? I mean, you are working alongside these folks who came up from different arenas than you. And you talked about having some addiction background, but you also talked about coming from a very different background. What are some of the lessons learned? Some of the what are the takeaways for you? What keeps you in this work that you and Brady have been doing? You guys could just be developers.
Yeah, that's not fun. I'll be honest. It's not really fun to be a developer. Everybody hates them, and rightfully so. So we, you know, I think what you started out with is exactly what we've learned. Like, the more that we shut up and listen, and not just listen for the sake of listening, but like really listen to understand and to embrace what people have experienced and recognize and learn how we can combat that. That's what we've tried to do. And I think there's also the aspect of, you know, this has come up a lot. Dr. Hollins referred to it, and where, you know, as a white person, it'd be really easy for me to get on my soapbox and talk about, you know, what we do or why we do it or whatever, and make it about me. And that's not the point. And it's something that we try really hard to, you know, I don't have a need to do the white savior thing, but it's easy to fall to that sometimes, because people will say like, oh, look what you're doing, it's so great. It's like, no, don't look at me. Look at this person who has come back from something so horrible and made something of themselves and put their family back together and returned to their children or whatever. That's like, whatever we do, wherever we go, we want to create a platform and give our microphone essentially to somebody else. And I think it's you know, for us, all we knew how to do was to use what we had. So, you know, we don't have a lot. We're not rich people. We're not, you know, we were just like, we have this company. How can we use this to make someone else's life better, right? And we know these people who've had this terrible trauma experience, you know, and the trauma experiences vary from racial issues to sexual issues to abuse issues. I mean, we've seen it all. And all we can do is say, here's what we have, God, we're offering it, use it for someone else, right? And so that looks like jobs, it looks like housing, it looks like resources and connection to people in our network. And beyond that, that's kind of all we know how to do. And the reason we keep doing this work is because we get so much more from it than we give, which sounds cliche and people say that all the time, but it's really true. Watching some of our people, especially some of those original 5 men that we hired, all of them, 100% of them have returned to their children. They were all fathers, all 5 of them. And they were all separated from their children while they were incarcerated. And they struggled to have a connection with their children following incarceration. And what we saw was, as they were rehabilitated, they were able to return to their children, to their mothers, to their partners, to their family. And that cycle, like when you talk about the kids, and Dom talks about the kids that he works with, some of them don't have the privilege of seeing their parents return. But what we have seen is, if you return a rehabilitated parent to a child, that is so much more momentous than any, mentor or program. Like, those things are needed. I'm not saying they're not, but returning a child to their family and putting a family back together, there's just something really magical about that. And so what we wanted to do was create that systemic, like break that cycle and stop the system, right? And we see the school to prison pipeline. It's like, we see it all the time. We meet people that come out, and then we hear about their kids going in, and we're like, how do we stop this? And so our goal always is, let's grab people at their point of reentry when they're the most vulnerable, provide them housing so that they're stable, provide them a job so that they have meaning and purpose and their time is full, and then provide them resources and community. And the community is the most important part. But that's what we always talk about, is sort of our 3-legged stool of support, is housing, a job, and community. And that community looks like a lot of things, but if we can provide a space for people to stabilize so that they can return to each other and to their communities more whole and to their families more whole, that's what we want to do. So being able to be a witness to those stories is truly the greatest honor of my life. And it has been so cool to see these kids receive their parents back, and to see mothers receive their sons back, and their daughters. And I would never do anything else. This is our life's calling. So.
Ooh, awesome. Now I have a question for all 4 of you, and it has to do with stamina and self-care. Everything you've described requires enormous amounts of effort, heart, passion, zeal, drive, energy, resources, and it has got to be draining sometimes. It's good work, but it can be hard work. So how do you take care of yourself, and how do you maintain the stamina needed to stay in this? Because I would imagine there are times when you want to you could have thrown your hands up and just said, enough.
And as they're answering, if you have a question, you want to throw it into the chat box, now would be the time. We'll have a little bit of time for questions. And we want to make sure people get that opportunity. So please answer, and we'll. And
we'll do quick answers, quick questions, quick answers, so we can get to a few others. Dom, how do you stay fresh, brother?
I'm going to Maui in 3 weeks. That's how I'm staying fresh.
All right, taking Sabbaths. All right, taking some break. Mother Walden.
Well, actually, with COVID, I've been locked up, and like I've been charged with a felony. So I'm locked up. But you know what gives me joy is one of the things that the Buddha said. The Buddha says, whatever is in your way is your way. So no matter when I try to move away from this, it is always in my way. So so I understand whatever's in your is your way. And so for me, is I do silent meditations. At one time I spent 4 hours in the silence once a week, and I have a deep spiritual practice. I have a well that's so deep that I can live in that well. And that well allows me to actually do the work that I do. And the energy that I have just comes from the ancestors and the Most High, because I'm absolutely standing on the shoulders of my grandmother and all the people who raised me right in segregation. to be a credit for my race and to do the work that I'm doing.
Thank you.
Amy?
Yeah, so a similar answer. We have a very strong spiritual practice. Our leadership team prays together very intentionally every Wednesday over our people and specific things that we ask God to provide for our people, for ourselves. And then we track answers to those prayers through specific stories and provisions that we can see. And that's been really life-giving for us. And then also, we have surround ourselves intentionally with people who love this population and seek to serve with us, and people who come from it. And that gives us a lot of joy to just walk alongside them and have them around us all the time. And they help us get the work done. We have a lot of really amazing staff who help us do all this because there's no way we could do it by ourselves. It's a lot. So.
Dr. Hollins.
Yeah, thank you. Boy, it's been great being here. I am better at telling everyone else how important self-care is than I am practicing it myself. But if I was to say one thing that I do regularly, it is that when I am able, I go to bed early, not on the weekends, but I go to bed at 7:30 and I read books about fairies and dragons and dwarves and elves and just escape. And I do that every night. And it's just a way to just kind of get away from it all. I don't watch TV. And then of course, my faith in God and talking and to him and listening to music as I'm driving to workshops, not right now, but just finding ways to be prepared to continue to be an instrument of his will so that I don't let my will get in the way of his, because I'm human. So I would say that's probably the most consistent way. Books.
Thank you.
I love those answers. I heard somebody share one time talking about our work in general, that it's a terrible job and a wonderful life. And I do think that perspective has to be carried, that if you're trying to figure out how to manage this thing to be a work-life balance, it's an inescapable problem. It's not going to happen. But if we embrace it, as Dr. Reverend Walden said, as the work before us is the work, like the problem before us is our life. That's what we are called to kind of live into. It's a way of perspective. So thank you all. And thank you for being here. We've got one question that's come into the chat box, and the person is asking about kind of the understanding around where the term people of color comes from, and the reference to white not being a color, or where that tension comes from. Dr. Hollins, can you speak to that?
Yeah,
I can speak to it too.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, Reverend Walden. You got the big.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'll just be quickly. I grew up in segregation, and the word colored meant black people. That's really what it was. And you had a lot of people that had colored on their birth certificate. You were either colored or Negro, and my birth certificate is Negro. And my mother's death certificate is Negro. And so one of the things that has happened over time is that we've always had to, every 10 years, there's a new name for us. We've been a minority, and so now this is another name, and I understand why it's there. For me, I always tell people, if their mother is African American, it's okay to say African Americans and other people of color. I think that we should always honor the womb that bore us, and then bring it forward that way. So I don't know. I mean, that's just my own personal thinking, but I don't know how it got out in the world, and you might know about that, Dr. Hollins, than I do. I was just talking from my own personal experience.
Yeah, no, I don't know where that came from, but I do know, and I know as I look at you, Lisa, you appear to be a Black woman, or at least a woman of color. Typically that question is asked by white people, well, aren't I, we're people of color too. And for me, it's less about, not that I think that it's not important to know where language came from, but I think it's important to wonder why white people want to be categorized as people of color, and what that does to the conversation around racism. Because now if we're all people of color, then we can no longer talk about the differences in our experiences. And so, you know, I didn't choose, I can tell you where, you know, white came from, and I can tell you where Caucasian and how all of that evolved. And what I find is that white people were good with being white, you know, when it meant, right, you know, the benefits but now when they're having to look at how whiteness has become this construction that has created this division and this sense of superiority and supremacy, then now white people want to say, well, aren't we people of color too? And so for me, it's more about a way to talk about our experiences. It's a way that we can name it. It becomes a tool. Now we have BIPOC. I want to write an article on why I don't want to use BIPOC. But we're always
What's
evolving,
BIPOC?
like Reverend said. Black, Indigenous, and people of color. BIPOC is like the newest now.
It's the watered down version of keeping us it's just a way to keep us at the bottom of the totem pole.
I agree. I agree. Yes.
Can I answer this question a little bit,
Yeah.
Pastor?
Go ahead.
So when
Yes, you
back
can.
in history, we were known by our regions. You were Ethiopian, you were Ugandan, you were, you know what I mean? You came from Haiti, whatever region you came from, or tribal, whatever tribe you belong to, that's how you were described. There was no colors. Nobody called you a color, right? So when you want to indoctrinate a people and take their history from them, you have to make sure that throughout the history of you indoctrinating them and brainwashing them, you have to take their belonging to something. You have to take, you don't want them to know their country they came from, or the region they came from, or the village they came from, or the tribe they came from. And in order to do that, you have to change who they call themselves. So when you call them colored folks, Negroes, you know what I'm saying, of African Americans, as we kept going through that process of indoctrination and brainwashing, eventually you don't know where you came from because you ain't calling yourself by the tribe or the region or the country that you came, or the village that you came from. You don't even know now. So now we're generations and generations and generations deeply in to that brainwashing. So calling us a colored or a Negro or whatever it is, or African American, steals us from our belonging or who we belong to. We don't even know what tribes we come from. We don't know what countries we come from. We don't know where we derive from.
Mm-hmm. But has it come to reflect an amalgam of all people who are considered non-white? When you say people,
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think so. Yeah.
And yeah, go ahead.
No, please, Dr. Hollins.
Well, I was going to say, I don't even say non-white because there's a centering in whiteness, right? You're either white or you're some other, something, right? And every group, whether it's amongst Indigenous people, Asian people, Black people, prefer to be referred to as Japanese American or, you know,
That's right.
you're from. And as Dominique said, and I hope I get to one day call you Dom too, like I'm close to you, but that we can't do that because we don't know who we are. We don't know where we came from, you know.
I've only been to Africa 4 times, and every time I've gone, I've always been asked, do you know where you're from, what tribe or country you're associated with? And I just don't.
But the one thing we do know is that we were stolen. That's the one thing we know. We were stolen from a land, from a continent. We were stolen from a mighty continent. And we're still the mighty Africans, okay? We're still the mighty Africans. No matter where you find us in the world, we're still the mighty Africans, okay?
And I would say that white people, though their experience is different because they benefited from it, just kind of, you know, thinking about the author from My Grandmother's Hands, and I got to memorize this, but he talks about white body trauma too. And I would almost, you know, if I talked with him, I'd love to ask him, you know, do you think that part of the loss of white people losing their culture also has created trauma? Certainly they benefited from it, but is part of what they are experiencing in trauma that they don't know what it means to be Italian. anymore. They don't know what it means to be. It's all been watered down. Maybe they have some inkling. Do they know why they gather in the kitchen, why they, what have you? Like, do they understand? And so I think people of color are saying, we don't want to blend in. We don't want to assimilate. We see what it's done to you, right? And we don't want to. And it's time for us to feel this deep sense of internal pride.
The author you referred to is Resmaa
What's the last name? It's Resmaa. I have my notes right here.
Menakem.
Menakem, yes, he's a
Resmaa Menakem.
therapist. My grandmother's hands.
Is there another question? Let's see.
There hasn't been another question. I wanted to play off of Dom's statement a little bit, and I think you guys can speak to this too. This whole idea of race is a construct that was developed intentionally to promote white supremacy and to promote kind of control over individuals. One of the most awkward experiences being in South Africa and seeing a board on the wall that described all the different ethnicities in ranking, with African and Black at the bottom, and how it was a construct developed to manage people and to promote whiteness. And I think it has to be named as what it is. It was not something designed by God. The colors were.
Well, but it was designed by the Catholic Church. The Pope, 1452, signed the paper to give Portugal to bring exclusive rights to bring the infidels, the non-believers, and the Africans out of Africa, because the Pope said that we would be in perpetual servitude. That's what the Pope said. And then for 5 years after that, they issued the doctrine of discovery. They said if any Christian that came to a land and the people was not Christian, they could take the land. So we have to go back and find out where it came from. And it came from the Catholic Church. And I always like for people to understand that. It was in 1452 beings out of Africa because they didn't have a soul.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some great writings recently on the doctrine of discovery and the fallacy of it. There's even some denominations that are working to denounce it because of the power of the idea that you can come to a country and take the land. If the people are infidels or unchristian, you can own the land as though your Christianhood gives you a right to possess somebody else's property. It's a very evil doctrine, and it was designed very intentionally. So thank you, Dr. Walden.
Andrew put a comment in the chat. He's going to be leading, I guess, a group through Resmaa's book starting February 16th at 7 p.m. If anyone is open to it, he made a note in the chat. If you want to capture that, you can do that.
We have to wrap up for time. There are a number of resources that are being dumped in the chat. We can make that available. People have asked, will this recording be available? The answer is yes. We record these sessions. It takes us a couple hours, and we dump them up onto a YouTube channel under the same link to Wrestling with Reconciliation that you got into this call. So you can go up to Urban Impact's YouTube channel. I think it's Urban Impact SEA, and the Wrestling with Reconciliation is a channel on our YouTube channel. Excuse me for the language. I think that's how it's written. And you can look at Wrestling with Reconciliation and look back through a number of the sessions. Aaron Jones' session, that the speaker at the MLK Prayer Breakfast, the time she came on the call, is on there, and previous Wrestling with Reconciliations as well. Thank you all so much for the depth of information, for your lives first and foremost, and your friendship and your willingness to join us and share with this community your brilliance and your life and your heart. And I know not only is it an hour less sleep, Caprice, but it's just you're emptying yourselves and you're pouring out. And as a community, we want to applaud and thank you and support you in your work you're doing. I will say that as these resources are dumping into chat, we're trying our best to collect the resources, and the Martin Luther King prayer breakfast, MLKingprayerbreakfast.com is working on a resource page where where stuff can just be available so folks can go and find resources and trying to find a way to organize those resources. We've got some folks working with us to help us pull that together. So give us some time, but we'll keep pushing out resources. Go, Caprice.
Steve, if anybody wants to save what's in chat, if you see the 3 dots next to if your chat is open, there's 3 dots. And when you open that up, it says save chat. When you go to close this out, it's going to pop up and you can then save it anywhere on your computer. So you should see file and then save chat. File and then 3 dots and just click save chat, and that'll give you all of the resources.
And if you can't find that, because I had a tough time the first time I did it, it creates a Zoom folder on your computer, and the chat will be named by the time or the session. Thank you, Caprice. That's helpful. And thank you, Marianne, for showing us that we could pin the guests and they would stay on the screen. I think at least on my screen, the 4 guests and Harvey and I stayed on the screen because we pinned them. So we learned that tonight as well. So takes a community. Pastor, would you close us?
Would you, for people like me who are a little slow, restate your comment, Dr. Hollins, about saving the chat?
Yeah. Do you open up your chat, and then where you see, everyone, when you're like at the bottom, you should see the word file. Don't pay attention to that.
Okay.
And you'll see 3 little dots. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Click on those little dots.
Got it. Okay.
You got it? Okay.
And hit save chat. Bam. I just saved it. Now where's it going to go?
When you go to close out of here, you're going to see the word Zoom chat or something. You can actually save it in whatever file you want to. Otherwise, it'll save automatically in the Zoom file.
Okay, super.
So I rename it and everything.
All right, beautiful. All right. Hey, thank you everyone for joining us again tonight. We trust that you have been encouraged by this chat, enlightened. Perhaps we've all learned a little something about life and living and what it's going to take for us to live into God's vision of being his family. You do realize that we were all created by the same Lord.
Amen.
Right? To be in his image and his likeness. And so we're doing our level best to break the myth, if you will, that one group is better than the other. In God's economy, guess what? We all have an inherent dignity that comes directly from above. So we want to learn to live into that vision and to love each other the way he loves us, and love each other the same way. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Right.
Be
God bless
well.
you. We'll be in touch with our guests. Amen.
Yes. Thank
Have a
you.
great weekend.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Go Seahawks. Oh,
Thank
not in the Super Bowl. Sorry.
Jeez.
Go anybody against Brady.
But don't let Brady win again, please.
Oh,
All right.
I appreciate you.
God bless.
This was
All right,
great.
Big. All right, Michael, Ted. All right, Nazli. Oh, shit.